If you've ever lain awake, calculating what you'd lose if everything went wrong, the house, the savings, the identity you built around having enough, this story is for you. There's a particular kind of fear that doesn't show up on any bank statement. It's not about the number. It's about who you'd be without it. Today, I want to tell you about a farmer who lost everything he owned in a single season. His land, his harvest, his name in the village, and ended up saying something so strange to his neighbors that they thought grief had taken his mind. What he said and why he said it, we'll get to. But first, you need to understand how much he actually lost because it wasn't small. It was everything a man in his position was supposed to spend a lifetime protecting. Before we go further, tell me in the comments, honestly, what's the one thing that, if you lost it, you're afraid you wouldn't know who you were anymore? Money, a job title, a house, a reputation. You might be surprised how many people reading this are carrying the exact same fear, silently, thinking they're the only one. His name was Tarek, and for 11 years he had the kind of luck that made other farmers quietly resentful. His fields sat on the good side of the river, where the water came slow and generous instead of fast and cruel. His grain stores were the fullest in the valley. He had 2 sons who worked without complaint, a wife who kept the household running like a well-oiled mill, and a growing reputation as the man other farmers came to when they needed a loan, a favor, or advice on when to plant. Tarek liked being that man. He liked it more than he ever admitted, even to himself. There was a particular feeling he got each autumn when the grain carts rolled in heavy and full, when neighbors stopped to admire his stores, when his name was spoken in the village with a certain respect reserved for people who had clearly done something right with their lives. He told himself the feeling was pride in good work. It was, partly. But underneath it was something else. A quiet, constant counting. A private ledger he kept not of coins but of worth. His worth. Measured in bushels, in land, in the number of people who needed him more than he needed them. He was not a cruel man. He gave grain to widows in hard winters. He forgave debts when a neighbor's child fell ill. But every act of generosity was, in some small, unspoken way, also a deposit. Proof to himself that he was the kind of man whose life meant something, whose name would be remembered, whose absence would leave a hole no one could fill. Then came the year the river changed course. It happened slowly at first, a shift in the current upstream that no one in the valley understood until it was too late. The water that had always favored Tarek's fields began cutting a new channel, and by midsummer his lower fields, the best ones, were standing in water that wouldn't recede. The grain rotted at the root. What the water didn't take, a blight took a few weeks later, moving through the remaining stalks like a rumor nobody could stop. By harvest, Tarek had almost nothing. He sold 2 parcels of land to cover his debts and still came up short. He sold a 3rd parcel, the one his father had cleared with his own hands, to a merchant from the next valley who didn't even bother to hide his satisfaction at the price. Word spread fast, the way it always does when a man who once lent money now needs to borrow it. The same neighbors who had once sought his advice began, quietly, to avoid his eyes in the market. But what he didn't know was that the hardest part hadn't arrived yet. By the following spring, Tarek had sold everything but the small house he lived in and the clothes on his back. His sons, ashamed and frightened, took work in a neighboring town, sending back what little they could. His wife stopped attending the market gatherings, tired of the sympathetic looks that felt sharper than contempt. And Tarek himself, the man who had once been consulted like an elder, found himself standing at the edge of his own empty field, doing something he hadn't done since he was a boy. Nothing at all. No harvest to plan, no stores to check, no one asking for his advice. The mornings were the hardest. For 11 years he had woken before dawn to the particular sound of his own certainty. Boots on the floor, the creak of the storehouse door, the low murmur of his sons already at work in the yard. Now he woke to silence, and the silence had a shape he didn't recognize. He would lie there for a long moment, waiting for the old urgency to arrive and tell him what needed doing. It never came. There was nothing left that needed him in the way the farm once had. He tried at first to fill the hours the way a man fills a wound, quickly, without looking too closely. He repaired fences that no longer belonged to him until the new owner asked him gently to stop. He offered advice to farmers downriver the way he always had, and noticed for the first time how their eyes drifted past him while he spoke, already searching for someone whose opinion still carried weight. It stung more than the debts had. The debts were numbers. This was quieter, and it went in deeper. For the first few weeks, he barely spoke. He would walk the boundary of what used to be his land, tracing the edge of soil that no longer belonged to him, as if his feet remembered a shape his hands no longer held. The village, predictably, had opinions. Some said he'd been cursed for pride. Others said the gods were testing him. A few, the kinder ones, simply brought food to his door and said nothing, because there was nothing helpful to say to a man who had lost the thing he'd built his whole identity around. And this is where everything changed, though not in the way anyone, including Tarek, expected. There was an old woman on the far edge of the village, a widow named Anong who lived alone in a house smaller than Tarek's toolshed had once been. She had no land, no grain stores, no sons sending money home. She had lived through 3 bad harvests, a fire, and the death of her husband, and yet she was, by every account, the calmest person in the valley. People visited her not because she had anything to give, but because sitting near her made their own worries feel smaller, the way a quiet room makes a loud thought seem less urgent. Tarek, out of habit more than hope, found himself at her door one evening. He didn't plan to say much. He just sat on the low stone bench outside her house, the way he used to sit outside his own grain store at dusk, watching the light change. Remember this detail. It matters later. Anong didn't ask him what happened. She already knew, as everyone did. Instead, she asked him a different question, the kind that lands somewhere below the ribs before the mind even catches up. Tarek, when your fields were full and your name was spoken with respect, were you, yourself, ever actually at peace? He opened his mouth to answer quickly, the way a man answers when he's certain of the answer, and then he stopped. Because the honest answer, the one he'd never said out loud, was no. He had been proud. He had been busy. He had been, in a strange way, afraid. Afraid of the exact thing that had now happened. Afraid every single season that this would be the year it all slipped away. The fullness had never actually quieted the fear. It had only postponed it and fed it, the way pouring water into a cracked jar never actually fills the jar. It just delays the moment you notice the crack. He sat with that for a long time, long enough that the light changed twice. But the turning point of this story isn't that conversation. It's what happened 3 days later. A message arrived from his eldest son. He had found steady work, saved carefully, and wanted to send enough money for his father to buy back at least one small parcel of the old land. Enough to plant again, enough to start rebuilding what had been lost. Tarek held that letter for a full day before he answered it. He walked again to Anong's house, letter in hand, and told her what his son had offered. He expected her to be glad for him. Instead, she asked the 7 words that would follow him for the rest of his life. Will the land fill the crack, Tarek? 7 words, not an answer. A question turned back on him. The same question she'd asked before, sharpened now by everything that had happened in between. He sat outside her house until well after dark that night, and for the first time since the river changed course. He wasn't calculating what he'd lost. He was asking, honestly, what he had actually been chasing all those years of fullness, the land itself, or the feeling the land was supposed to give him. The feeling of being enough. The feeling that had never once, in 11 years of abundance, actually arrived and stayed. He wrote back to his son that night. He thanked him, and he asked him to keep most of the money for himself, for his own life, his own future. He would take only a small piece of land, small enough to feed his family, nothing more, not to rebuild what he'd had, to plant something different. The neighbors, when they heard, assumed grief had finally broken him. A man refusing land in a valley where land was the only currency that mattered? It made no sense to them. But Tarek wasn't broken. For the first time in over a decade, he felt something closer to whole. Here is what that story is actually about, underneath the river and the blight and the letter. Tarek's real crisis was never the loss of his fields. It was the discovery that his sense of worth had been quietly, entirely outsourced to something that could be taken from him by a river he didn't control, a blight he didn't cause, a market he had no power over. For 11 years, he had confused fullness with safety. He believed that if the stores stayed full enough, the fear underneath would finally go quiet. It never did. It just wore a fuller costume. That merchant selling his father's land at a discount, that quiet dread in the pit of Tarek's stomach every time the grain carts came in a little lighter than expected, that's you, too, sometimes, checking your account balance and feeling your chest tighten before your mind has even processed the number. It's not really about the digits. It's about a private, unspoken fear that your worth is tied to a total that can move without your permission. That fear doesn't ask whether you have a little or a lot. It follows both the empty account and the comfortable one, because it was never actually about the account at all. This is what the old teachings call attachment, not owning something, which is simply life, but needing something to remain a certain way in order to feel like yourself. Tarek didn't need land to survive. He needed it to be the man the village respected, the man whose absence would leave a hole. That need was the crack in the jar. No harvest, however abundant, could ever fill it, because it wasn't a harvest-shaped hole to begin with. Notice something important here because it's easy to miss. Attachment rarely announces itself as fear. It usually shows up dressed as responsibility, as ambition, as simply being smart about the future. Tarek would never have described his 11 good years as anxious. He would have called them productive. That's how attachment survives so long undetected. It borrows the language of virtue. It's only in its absence, in the sudden quiet of an empty field, that you can finally hear what was underneath the busyness the whole time. So what do you actually do with this, tonight, in your own life, where the river hasn't changed course but you still feel the current shifting underneath you? First, take 5 minutes tonight and write down, honestly, what you believe your bank balance says about who you are, not what it should say. What you actually, secretly believe, even if it embarrasses you. You cannot loosen a grip you refuse to look at directly. Second, think of one season in your life, even a hard one, when you had less than you have now and still felt, for a few days at least, genuinely at peace. Write down what was actually present in that moment. Notice that it probably wasn't money. Third, and this is the one that matters most, tonight, before you sleep, write down 3 things in your life right now that money did not buy and cannot take away. Not people you love in the abstract. Specific mornings, specific quiet moments, specific proof that you were already, at some point recently, enough. Keep that list somewhere. You'll see it the next time your chest tightens over a number. This isn't a call to reject ambition or stop caring about your finances. Tarek still farmed. He still worked hard on his small new plot, still wanted a good harvest. The difference wasn't in the work. It was in what he was quietly asking the harvest to do for him afterward. Picture him now, years later, at dusk, on that small plot of land he chose instead of the larger one he was offered. The stores are modest. The house is smaller than it once was. But he sits outside in the evening light the way he used to. And this time, the quiet doesn't feel like waiting for the next loss. It just feels like evening. In his own words, spoken once to his eldest son who finally understood. I used to think I was building a life. I was only building a wall to keep the fear out. The fear climbed over it every single year. It wasn't until the wall came down that I noticed the fear was gone too. And maybe that's the real question underneath all of this, for you as much as for Tarek. Not how much is enough, but what you are secretly asking your money to fix. That money was never built to fix in the first place. That question won't show up on any bank statement either, but it might be the only one that actually matters. If this story gave you even a moment of that same quiet, there are more waiting for you here. Next time, I want to tell you about a king who traded his crown for a single night of sleep, and what he asked for in return when he woke. Walk gently, hold loosely,